The scent of lemon pound cake and freshly brewed tea hung in the air of my small, tidy living room, the same living room where I'd raised my daughter, Brittany. It was a scent meant to signal comfort, warmth, a Sunday afternoon visit, but today it felt like a cloying, sweet funeral shroud. Brittany sat across from me on the floral sofa, the one her father, Paul, and I had bought on our 10th anniversary. She was wringing her hands, a gesture I knew meant she was about to deliver bad news she believed was for my own good. Her husband, Jason, sat beside her, a portly man with the soft, expectant look of a well-fed vulture. He avoided my gaze, focusing instead on a small water stain on the ceiling, as if calculating the cost of its repair. "Mom," Brittany began, her voice a carefully rehearsed melody of concern. "Jason and I have been talking. We've been so worried about you, rattling around in this big old house all by yourself." I sipped my tea, the porcelain cup steady in my hand despite the tremor I felt deep in my chest. I'd been alone for 5 years since Paul passed, and not once had they expressed this level of anxiety. Their visits were dutiful, brief, and always peppered with questions about the house's upkeep and my finances. I knew this was no ordinary conversation. This was an ambush. The stairs are a hazard, and the yard is so much work. We just think it's time to consider a more practical living situation. For you, Jason finally chimed in, his voice a low, unctuous rumble. "We found a wonderful place, Irene. It's called Pleasant Valley Living. It's more of a community than a home. They have activities, nurses on site, 3 square meals a day. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were busy mentally appraising the antique grandfather clock in the corner. I saw the glint of calculation, the barely concealed avarice. They weren't worried about me falling down the stairs. They were worried about the property values falling before they could cash in. They saw this house, my home of 45 years, not as a repository of memories, but as a locked treasure chest, and me as the inconvenient breathing lock. "We're putting you in a home, Mom. It's for the best," Brittany said, the final, brutal words landing with the soft thud of a shovelful of dirt on a coffin. My heart, a tired old bird, fluttered painfully in my ribs. I looked at my daughter's face, searching for the little girl who used to bring me dandelions and cry when she scraped her knee. I saw only a stranger, her features hardened by impatience and greed. I saw Paul's worst fears realized. But then I remembered his last promise, his final desperate gambit, prepared for just this occasion. A hidden strength, cold and hard as a diamond, formed in my gut. I let my shoulders slump. I allowed a single genuine tear to trace a path down my wrinkled cheek. It was a tear for the daughter I had lost, not for the future she was planning for me. I looked at her, my expression one of deep sadness and resignation, and gave a slow, defeated nod. "If you think it's for the best, dear," I whispered. She didn't see the knowing glint in my eye. She had no idea her inheritance was actually a massive debt I was about to gift wrap just for her. 3 days later, Brittany drove me to tour Pleasant Valley Living. The name was a cruel irony, a marketing fiction designed to mask the sterile reality of the place. There were no pleasant valleys, only a manicured patch of unnaturally green lawn and a few dispirited rose bushes. The air inside didn't smell of nature, but of antiseptic, overcooked cabbage and a faint, lingering scent of despair. Brittany, however, was in her element, playing the role of the devoted daughter with theatrical flair. "See, Mom? Isn't it lovely?" she chirped, gesturing at the pale mint-green walls and the polished linoleum floors that squeaked under our shoes. A group of residents sat in wheelchairs in a common room, staring blankly at a game show blaring from a television mounted too high on the wall. None of them looked at us. They seemed to have retreated to a place where the outside world could no longer reach them. A perky young woman named Brenda, the resident relations coordinator, led our tour. Her smile was as bright and artificial as the silk flowers in the lobby vase. "And this is our dining hall," she announced, sweeping her arm towards a room filled with small, formica-topped tables. Chef-prepared meals 3 times a day. We cater to all dietary needs. Brittany nodded enthusiastically. "That's wonderful. Mom has been losing so much weight. I worry she isn't eating properly." I remained silent, my hand clutching the strap of my purse. I had lost weight from the grief of losing Paul, a grief Brittany had never once asked me about. At home, I ate the simple, nourishing meals I'd always cooked. Here, I would be served pureed meatloaf and jello. We were shown a room, a small, box-like space identical to dozens of others lining a long, featureless corridor. It contained a narrow bed, a small dresser, and a single armchair facing a window that overlooked the parking lot. "You can bring your own photos to make it feel just like home," Brenda said, her voice dripping with false cheer. Brittany walked over to the window. "The view is practical," she said, her back to me. "You can see when I come to visit." I knew those visits would become scarcer and scarcer once the house was sold and the money was in her account. I looked at the stark, empty room and felt a chill. This was the cage they had chosen for me. It was meant to be the last room I would ever know. I forced myself to look frail, confused, overwhelmed. "It's very clean," I murmured, my voice trembling slightly. Brittany patted my arm, a gesture of patronizing reassurance. "You'll be so safe here, Mom, so cared for." She thought she was sealing my fate. In truth, she was simply walking deeper into a trap laid 5 years ago by a man whose love for me was far more powerful than her greed. I let her lead me out, my meekness a perfect camouflage for the storm gathering within me. That evening, with the cloying memory of Pleasant Valley living still fresh in my mind, I climbed the creaking stairs to the attic. The house was silent around me, each groan of the old floorboards a sigh of shared history. This was my last act of remembrance before I set the wheels of justice in motion. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light from a bare bulb, illuminating forgotten treasures and relics of a life well lived. Stacks of my children's drawings, Paul's old golf clubs, a rocking horse with one ear missing. In the far corner, behind a stack of National Geographic magazines, was the heavy steel footlocker I was looking for. I knelt, my old knees protesting, and worked the combination on the lock, our wedding anniversary. The lid opened with a metallic groan. Inside, nestled amongst old tax returns and yellowed photographs, was a handsome mahogany box. I lifted it out and brought it downstairs to the kitchen table. My hands trembled as I opened it. There, on top of a stack of neatly bundled papers, was a letter in Paul's familiar, elegant script. It was addressed simply to my Irene. I unfolded it, the paper soft and worn from the many times I had read it since his passing. "My dearest love," it began. "If you are reading this, it means my grandest venture has failed, and I have left you with a terrible burden. I am so sorry. My dream of building something that would last, something for you and Brittany, became a nightmare. The loans, they were too much. The market turned, and I couldn't recover." My eyes filled with tears, not of pity, but of love for this brilliant, flawed man who had tried to capture the sun for his family. He had shielded me from the stress of his failing architectural design firm, always coming home with a smile, never letting on that the foundation of our financial lives was crumbling. The papers beneath the letter told the full story, was crumbling. He had leveraged everything against the business, including the house. The assets were all held within a complex family trust, the Montgomery Family Legacy Trust. But the legacy wasn't a fortune. It was a debt, a staggering 7-figure debt owed to private lenders who had backed his last desperate project. And then, at the bottom of the box, was the final document, drafted by his lawyer. It was an instrument of transfer. As the current trustee, I was managing the assets and the debt, keeping the creditors at bay with small regular payments from my modest savings. But the document allowed me to relinquish my trusteeship. Upon my signature, the role of sole trustee, and with it, full control of the trust's assets and full liability for its colossal debts, would pass to the named beneficiary, our daughter, Brittany. She will think she is inheriting a kingdom, Paul had written. I pray she never forces your hand, Irene. But if she shows you the cruelty I fear is in her heart, use this. It is a terrible key, but it will unlock you from this prison of debt. Let her greed be her undoing. I folded the letter, my resolve hardening like steel. Paul had given me a choice. Brittany had just made it for me. The next morning, I made a phone call, not to a friend, not to a grief counselor, but to a man whose name Brittany had never even heard, Mr. Stanley Roth. He had been Paul's lawyer, a quiet, sharp-as-a-tack man who had helped my husband draft his final, desperate financial strategy. He was retired now, but he had promised Paul he would see this through, if it ever came to it. Irene, he said, his voice warm but professional, I was wondering when I might hear from you. I take it the time has come? There was no surprise in his tone, only a somber understanding. Yes, Stanley, I said, my voice clear and steady. The time has come. Can you come to the house this afternoon? He arrived at precisely 2:00, a tall, thin man in a tweed jacket, carrying a worn leather briefcase. He looked around the living room with a sad, knowing expression. He loved this house, Mr. Roth said softly. He would be heartbroken to know you were being forced out of it. I poured him a glass of iced tea. He would be more heartbroken by the reason, Stanley, I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. I led him to the dining room table where I had laid out the contents of the mahogany box. He examined the documents with a practiced eye, nodding slowly. It's all in order, he confirmed, tapping a finger on the transfer agreement. The Montgomery Family Legacy Trust. The assets, the house, the savings accounts, the remaining stock portfolio are legally inseparable from the liabilities. Whoever accepts the position of trustee accepts it all. He looked at me over the rim of his spectacles, his gaze serious. Irene, I must ask you one last time. Are you certain? This is an irreversible and formidable step. Once Brittany signs, she will be legally responsible for a debt of nearly $2 million. The creditors, whom you have so diligently kept at bay, will descend upon her. She will lose everything. The house will be seized and sold, but it won't even cover half of what is owed. I met his gaze without flinching. My daughter and her husband look at me and see a nuisance. They see this home as their personal bank account, and the nursing home as a convenient place to store me while they drain it. They speak of love and concern, but their actions are filled with nothing but greed and contempt. They have made their choice, Stanley. Now I am making mine. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of Mr. Roth's mouth. Very well, he said, pulling a fresh set of papers from his briefcase. Let's prepare the final documents for her signature. She will need to sign a form accepting the role of trustee to gain control of the assets. I will be present to witness it, to ensure everything is perfectly legal. He was no longer just a lawyer. He was an instrument of a long-delayed, righteous reckoning. Brittany insisted on a last family dinner at the house before my move. The gesture, meant to look like a fond farewell, was transparently an opportunity for her and Jason to finalize their plans for the property. The air was thick with a grotesque, celebratory tension. Jason had brought a bottle of expensive champagne, which he opened with a flourish. To new beginnings, he toasted, raising his glass. For everyone. His eyes met Brittany's in a look of pure, shared triumph. I raised my glass of water, my hand steady. To new beginnings, I echoed softly. They were so blinded by their avarice, they couldn't hear the ominous undertone in my voice. Throughout the meal, a lavish spread of takeout from their favorite Italian restaurant, a stark contrast to my simple home cooking, they spoke as if I weren't even there. The first thing to go will be this wallpaper, Brittany said, waving a breadstick at the delicate vine-patterned walls I had picked out with Paul 30 years ago. We'll open up the kitchen into the dining room, a big island, granite countertops. It'll completely transform the space. Jason nodded in vigorous agreement, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. And the floors. We'll need to rip out this old carpet and put down hardwood. It'll add at least $50,000 to the resale value. They weren't talking about a home. They were talking about a flip. My home. My life. They dissected it room by room, memory by memory, assigning a dollar value to each piece and finding it wanting. I ate my lasagna in small, deliberate bites, playing the part of the frail, senile old woman they believed me to be. I would occasionally look up, a confused expression on my face, and ask a simple question. More bread, dear. This only seemed to fuel their confidence in the rightness of their decision. See, Brittany whispered to Jason, loud enough for me to hear. She can't even follow a conversation. We're doing the right thing. At one point, Brittany turned to me, her voice oozing with condescension. Don't you worry about a thing, Mom. We'll handle all the paperwork. All you'll need to do is sign a few things so we can manage your affairs. It will make everything so much simpler. I looked at her, my daughter, a woman so eager to claim her inheritance that she was feasting at my table while planning the demolition of my life. I gave her a weak, watery smile. Whatever you say, dear, you know best. The champagne flutes clinked again. They were toasting their future. They had no idea they were actually toasting their own ruin. The trap was set. All that was left was for them to walk into it. The day of the move dawned gray and drizzly, the sky weeping in sympathy for the life I was leaving behind. A large moving truck was parked in the driveway, its open back a gaping maw ready to swallow the contents of my home. 2 young men in uniforms were efficiently wrapping furniture in blankets and loading boxes. The sounds of tearing tape and heavy footsteps echoed through the nearly empty rooms, a brutal soundtrack to the dismantling of my world. Brittany flitted about, directing the movers with an air of proprietary authority. Be careful with that clock. It's a valuable antique, she'd snap, before turning to me with a saccharine smile. Everything is going smoothly, Mom. See? No stress for you. Mr. Roth arrived at 10, just as promised, his leather briefcase in hand. He set it down on the now bare dining room table, the only piece of furniture left in the room. Brittany, Jason, he said in a formal tone, if you could join us, there are some documents that require your attention before Irene departs. Jason and Brittany exchanged a look of eager anticipation. This was it, the final step, the signing over of the kingdom. Of course, Brittany said, pulling up 2 folding chairs the movers had left behind. Whatever you need. Mr. Roth laid out the papers with precision. This first document, he explained, pointing to a page, is Irene's formal resignation as trustee of the Montgomery Family Legacy Trust. He slid it over to me, and I signed it with a hand that did not shake. He slid it over. My signature was firm, a final, decisive stroke. And this, he continued, sliding a second document toward Brittany, is the acceptance of appointment of successor trustee. By signing this, Brittany, you will assume full control of the trust and all its assets, as stipulated by your father. Brittany barely skimmed the page. Her eyes were fixed on the bottom line, hungry for the power it represented. Jason leaned over her shoulder, a greedy smile plastered on his face. "It's just a formality, honey," he urged. "Sign it so we can get Mom settled and get on with things." She picked up the pen Mr. Roth offered. "I just want to say, Mom," she said, pausing for a moment to look at me, her face a mask of false sincerity, "that we're doing this because we love you." I met her gaze, and for the first time, I let the coldness show. I did not smile. I did not nod. I simply watched as she scribbled her name on the line. The ink was barely dry when Mr. Roth collected the papers, placed them neatly in his briefcase, and snapped it shut. The sound was like a cell door closing. "It is done," he said. He nodded to me. I stood up, picked up the small overnight bag at my feet, the only thing I was taking with me, and walked toward the front door without a backward glance. "Goodbye, Brittany," I said to the empty hall. I didn't need to see her face. The trap was sprung. The next morning, Brittany and Jason walked into the downtown branch of the city's largest bank with the confident swagger of lottery winners. Mr. Roth had instructed them to meet him there to begin the process of asset consolidation. They were shown into a glass-walled conference room where Mr. Roth and a stern-looking woman in a navy blue suit were waiting. The nameplate on her desk read Ms. Thatcher, Vice President of Special Assets. The term meant nothing to Brittany, who was practically vibrating with excitement. "Good morning," she chirped, taking a seat. "We are so ready to get started. I have a list of transfers I'd like to initiate today." Ms. Thatcher did not smile. She slid a thick file across the polished table. "Ms. Montgomery," she began, her voice as cold and hard as the marble floor in the lobby, "we have been awaiting this meeting. Now that you are the sole trustee of the Montgomery Family Legacy Trust, we need to discuss the outstanding obligations." Brittany's smile faltered. "Obligations? I'm here to manage the assets. The house, my mother's savings." Ms. Thatcher cut her off. "The assets of the trust are inextricably linked to its liabilities. As Mr. Roth can confirm, your acceptance of trusteeship was an acceptance of both." Mr. Roth spoke for the first time, his tone calm and factual. "Brittany, your father's company, Montgomery Designs, collapsed with significant debt. To protect your mother, he structured the trust so that she could manage the assets while quietly servicing the debt. When you signed the transfer yesterday, you assumed her position. You assumed the debt." The color drained from Brittany's face. Jason sputtered, "What debt? What are you talking about? This is our inheritance." Ms. Thatcher opened the file. "The Montgomery Family Legacy Trust is currently in arrears to a consortium of private lenders to the sum of $1,874,000 plus accrued interest," she stated flatly. "As the new trustee, you are now personally liable. We have been instructed by our clients to call in the full amount. The trust's primary asset, the property at 904 Sycamore Place, will be placed under immediate lien and seized for liquidation. It is valued at approximately $700,000. The remaining liquid assets, the savings and investment accounts, totaling around $150,000, will also be seized. That will still leave you with a personal shortfall of over $1 million. Brittany stared, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "No," she whispered. "No, this is a mistake. Mom, she would never." Her voice trailed off as the full, horrifying truth crashed down upon her. She looked at Mr. Roth, her eyes wide with panic and betrayal. "You tricked me." Mr. Roth met her gaze, his expression unyielding. "Your mother gave you 45 years of love and a home. In return, you tried to put her in a cage and sell her memories to the highest bidder. You didn't inherit a fortune, Brittany. You inherited the consequences of your own greed. Jason slumped in his chair, his face pale and sweaty. Brittany began to hyperventilate, the fantasy of granite countertops and luxury vacations dissolving into a nightmare of endless, crushing debt. The public confrontation was complete, not with shouting, but with the cold, brutal numbers on a ledger. Her ruin was absolute, and it was entirely of her own making. I sat in a comfortable armchair in my new apartment, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands. It wasn't large or grand like the old house, but it was mine. The small one-bedroom unit was in a quiet building for independent seniors, a place I had chosen and paid for myself, with a private annuity Paul had set up for me years ago, a fund entirely separate from the Poison Trust. My window didn't overlook a parking lot, but a small, peaceful park where I could watch children play and dogs chase squirrels. The air smelled of clean linen and my own lavender potpourri, not cabbage and despair. I was free. Mr. Roth had called an hour ago to tell me everything was finalized. The house had been seized. Brittany and Jason's bank accounts were frozen. He told me Brittany had screamed, then sobbed, then tried to call me, but Mr. Roth had already followed my instructions to block her number from my new phone. The legal battle they faced would be long, humiliating, and ultimately hopeless. They had wanted the house and the money so badly, and now the weight of it would crush them. I felt a pang, not of pity, but of a deep, sorrowful closure. I had not wanted this for my daughter, but she had forced my hand. She had shown me the person she had become, and I had simply shown her the reflection in the mirror. A sliver of afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating the single photograph on my mantelpiece, a picture of me and Paul on our wedding day, young, hopeful, and unaware of the trials life had in store. He had tried to build a kingdom for us, and when it failed, he had built me a shield instead. I had carried that shield for 5 long years, protecting his memory and the daughter who had no idea of the sacrifice. Now, the burden was lifted. I took a slow, deep breath, the first truly easy breath I had taken in years. I had not sought revenge, but justice. I had not found wealth, but peace. As I watched a young family laughing in the park below, I understood that this was the true inheritance, the only one that ever really mattered, and it was something my daughter, in her boundless greed, would now never know.